I guess, what I was seeing outside, just being a kid with my neck broke into the sky. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean, dude. And so then in comparison to the last album, which took some really important values on board and tried to educate people with your music, does this album carry that weight still, or does it dream a bit bigger?
Oh, it's bigger. I think it's bigger, faster, stronger. I think the first one was a valiant representation of what I wanted to accomplish and got it done. And then this one is just more so kind of shooting at the gods.
Yeah, you found your path and now it's time to push on. Pixel Bath is the name of the new album, everyone. 23rd of October, it's going to be dropping. And I think one of the other amazing things about it is that with your sound, the lines are so blurred right now. I don't even want to categorize you in any genre at all. I think there's nothing worse than someone putting you in a box, right?
No, 100%. I think it's a disservice to the people that, do listen to things that are multifaceted when it comes to genres. So
you found strengths in the likes of pop and hip hop and punk though, and being able to kind of mesh them all together into a melting pot to make your music. What did you find was the connection between all of them? What brought them all together quite naturally for you?
I think it was always just a youthful energy, just being kind of like an angsty 17-year-old. So all the types of music that I really enjoyed all have that similar speaking to, my younger self and trying to make sure that everything that I listened to was all packaged just for somebody like myself that didn't have a genre preference as a kid.
I just wanted to ask you one more question as well, because I think this is a really important one. Can you tell us about how you kind of come up into music and what your heritage is?
Of course. I was birthed through music, so my mother learned English through hip-hop. My mother is Mexican, and my father is African-American, and my mother came to the United States basically when she was 17, didn't know a lick of English, and she was able to learn literally English through listening to hip-hop. In the same vein, my mom would listen to Michael Jackson and Prince and even the Smiths. The Smiths are really big in Mexico, so there was a lot of musical influence that she was able to pass over. And then my dad also was, kind of a gangster rapper, and so was my grandmother. My musical upbringing was definitely a meld of two people's experiences growing up.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have two very strong communities there, right? Were you able to explore what they gave you and take it further at a young age?
Oh yeah, I think my mom was definitely the catalyst for me making music. She kind of was like, go for it and do anything that's going to make you feel fulfilled as a person. So, a lot of the stuff that I wanted to do as a kid, didn't have much money to do so, but she said, if you can figure out a way to do it, then do it. So, from watching YouTube tutorials on how to play guitar and piano and stuff like that, and going to the library and even borrowing CDs from the library, that stuff was all just from my mom telling me to be utilitarian with the stuff that I did have and understand that I could actually make something that felt like me.
I mean, your mum sounds absolutely phenomenal, so big up to her, definitely.
Yours that makes your life that little bit better.
It certainly was for mine.
Policies we're going to see. I actually think he did pretty well, considering that Joe Biden does have a speech impediment, and considering, being interrupted multiple times and what that can do to someone, in a stressful situation with a speech impediment, I think he's done a great job. He has some reference.
I was stressed, and I wasn't the one getting interrupted. I was stressed hearing the interruptions.
Exactly. So I think, he did well, but I hate to say that he did well in comparison to Trump's performance. I wish that I could say, Biden definitely won that. He definitely appealed to the Democratic Party and gave us the answers that we wanted. To be honest, the majority of Democratic voters are voting for Biden because he's the alternative to what Democratic voters see as a worser future.
Joe Biden did at one point say, "Shut up, man," to the president. It seemed like it wasn't very presidential. Is he letting down the Democratic Party here?
I don't believe so. Not in today's current climate, where really debates have turned into what sound bites can you get. And I think presidents and also their campaigns realize that in today's, social media-based culture, that sound bites are what's important. Him saying "shut up, man" has been trending on social media ever since the debate, and it's been, held as a champion moment for Joe Biden.
Well,
so I personally would probably but I don't think that's where the American culture is currently.
Well, speaking of sound bites and what you can get from a debate, let's talk about the soundbite that everyone is talking about. That seemed to be the key moment of the debate. I was on the sofa watching it, and when it happened, I went, that's it. That's the biggest moment of this debate. I knew it was the biggest moment of the debate, and I hadn't even gotten to the end of the debate. It was, of course, when Chris Wallace asked the president to denounce white supremacy. Let's hear a little bit about what that sounded like.
Are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups and to say that they need to stand down and not add to the violence in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we've seen in Portland? Are you prepared to specifically do it? Well, go ahead.
I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing, not from the right wing.
So what are you saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see
Well,
peace.
then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it. You want to call them? What do you want to call them? Give me a name. Give me a
White
name.
supremacists and
Would you like me to get
white
that?
supremacists and right
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what. Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left, because this is not a right-wing problem. This is a left. This is a left-wing problem.
White supremacists.
Antifa is an idea, not an organization.
Oh, you got it.
Not
Kidding.
militia. That's what is
It's an idea.
FBI directed.
Wow, that was what I think is one of the key moments of the debate, where President Trump said, Proud Boys stand by and stand back and stand by. But obviously for all of the London listeners right now, we, aren't as familiar with what goes on in the States and in terms of different organizations, so let me just shed a little bit of light here. The Proud Boys is a US neo-fascist group that was classified in 2008 by the FBI as an extremist group. It's been recognized as being Anti-Defamation League described the group as misogynistic, Islamophobic, transphobic, and anti-immigration. It's a male-only group. It only admits men. It firmly believes that women's place is back in the household, and it actively promotes that. To join the Proud Boys, members must make an oath, and the oath starts, "I am proud Western chauvinist. I refuse to apologize for creating a modern world." They adamantly admitted that they're not, adamantly are.
Antifa
was going to say, Greg, let me just jump in there because there is a news that has hit the news today earlier on that Donald Trump has said that the far right should stand down and let law enforcement do its work after his failure to condemn it. So he has come out and said, I don't know who the Proud Boys are. That's a direct quote from President Trump. Despite urging them on in the debate, he says he doesn't know who the Proud Boys are.
Yeah, but I believe that, and I also think that the president is not a great orator, and so he stumbles when he's pressured on in these little moments. But look at what he's actually done. You know, not what he's partly what he said, but also what he's actually accomplished. He's done more for African Americans and other minorities in the United States in the last 3 years than surely his predecessors did in the 8 years of the Obama and Biden administration. So, you know, he had a chance to message the facts and the outcomes. I don't think he did a good job of doing it. Obviously, he didn't do a good job of doing that. You know, it was a chaos last night. I mean, I completely agree that the president fell down. It was not a good moment for the country. It wasn't a good moment for each candidate. But if he had messaged what he's actually accomplished for minorities, especially in African Americans, it would have been a great moment, and he missed that opportunity.
Okay, I want to jump over to Caitlin. Caitlin, do you agree with Greg that the president has done more for African Americans in his tenure in the White House than his predecessors have?
Well, for one, I'm not African American, so I don't necessarily feel that I can, speak on what my experience has been underneath, Trump's presidency. I will say, though, as, an Asian American, I wouldn't necessarily say that my life has been better due to any instances related to Trump, or even his government. For example, just barely a few weeks ago, 164 Republicans voted against a sentiment that would basically say that anti-Asian American racism, or racism against Asian Americans is wrong. 164 members of Congress voted against
changes for those very identity groups.
All right, Greg, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank
I
you so
appreciate
much
it.
for joining us, and I really hope we get to talk to you as the election, I don't know what you call it, furore, the frenzy, as it just reaches and just picks up momentum, because of course we're in the middle of it now, but it's only going to get more intense, I imagine, Greg.
Salma, great to be here. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for joining us. Caitlin, before I let you go as well, what would you like to see from Joe Biden over the next debate?
Okay, well, first of all, I would just like to state that currently income inequality in the U.S. is also greatest among Asian people, and the poverty rate for Asian Americans is also higher than it's ever been. But going forward, I would like to see Joe Biden take more definite stances and more definite policies. He was very, very moderate and generalized as much as he could, and I'm not necessarily saying that he needs to have, more left-leaning ideals, but I felt like all of his answers were very generalized and were not very straightforward, and no one really got a true idea of what he was wanting to do. For example, when it came to, justice and law enforcement, he stated that he would have people from law enforcement and from different racial groups come to the White House and that he would speak to them. Okay, that's great, but what policies are going to come from that? Is he going to create a task force that's going to help push legislation? What is he planning on doing after that?
Okay, then, thank you so much for joining us here on The Late Show tonight. Of course, you've still got the rest of your evening ahead of you over in Pennsylvania. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and best of luck with the rest of the debate. Frenzy, again, I don't know what to call it, just this huge, massive emotion as I imagine we roll into the 3rd of November. And hopefully we'll get to chat to you again. But thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
Presidential debate there. You're here with me, Salma Al-Wadani, on The Late Show. Of course, we're talking about the major stories, the headlines, what caught our eyes, and obviously our eyes have been glued to our television screens last night as we watched the presidential debate over in the US between President Trump and his contender Joe Biden. Maybe you did watch it, maybe you didn't, but I'd love your thoughts. 0800 731 2000. Of course, we're talking about our very own leaders closer to home as well, Mr. Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister, and whether you feel confident in his abilities and whether you understand the rules. Of course, the Prime Minister has come out earlier in the week to apologise for a bit of the confusion about the rules in the northeast of England. He came and spoke to the country today at 5 p.m. in a press briefing, in which he was saying that we are at a critical moment. The number of cases are rising, the deaths are rising as well, and our plans are essential, and he is reaffirming that he's not going to hesitate to impose further restrictions if needed. Apparently, we're in for a long winter. Now, this comes as the latest UK COVID figures show there have been a further 7,108 cases and another 71 deaths. Our numbers seem to be creeping up slowly. Are you worried? Yes, it might be happening slowly, but they are indeed going up. Are you worried? Do you trust the Prime Minister? Do you trust our government? Do you feel like we're in safe hands? Do you know, above all, what we're supposed to be doing, what the rules say? I'd love your thoughts on these stories. The Prime Minister and the presidents in the state, the same presidents, the would-be president and the president himself. 0800 731 2000. Right now, I've got Anthony in Surrey on the line. Anthony, what do you think of the debate last night?
Hi there, Salma.
Hello, good
My voice.
evening.
I've got a virus, I've got a stuffy cold, so I hope I don't sound too awful.
You can't come on air and say you've got a virus without clarifying. You've just got a cold, you don't have COVID. Are you fine? Are you good? Are you
I
well?
hope not. I hope not, because you try and get a test, it's impossible.
Well,
I've tried the system.
some people. Oh, did you try to get tested to check if it was COVID? And what
I can't
happened?
report it. Well, I just rang up and I was exhausted by the end of it, so I thought I'm just going to wait to see if I'm still alive tomorrow and I won't bother.
I thought you could order one online and have it posted out to you. Did you try that?
Yeah, none available.
Okay, and do you have a car? Can you drive through to any of the drive-through places?
No, I can't. I'm a carrier, you see. We've spoken before about this, and no, I cannot drive to in the middle of nowhere to get a test, so I'll just have to play this by ear.
Wow, how fascinating, Anthony. You are unable to get a test. You have, you don't sound very well, like you just said.
No.
You've got a sore throat, and you don't know whether it's COVID because you can't get a test.
I just hope not. I'm touching wood to speak to you.
Well, let's just put a pin in America for a second, because I want to stick with you on this. You can't get a test. You don't know if you've got COVID. You don't know if you've got symptoms. You're just going to wait and see what happens, because you're also a carer, so it means you need to be around. But also, you don't want to put anyone else in danger.
Does he have a boiled egg or does he have cereal?
I imagine he has someone there to sort that out for him that he never has to really think about it.
Oh no, of course not. Still has servants. Well, that's not the word perhaps we would use.
Okay, do you have confidence then in the Prime Minister and the government? And obviously all the rules are in place. You know, in the briefing he has said, look, these are the rules and we need to be sticking to them. Do you know what those rules are? Do you know what you're allowed to do? Do you have confidence in the government and the Prime Minister?
Confidence in the government, no, but I've been trying to avoid the viruses and everything. I've worn the masks, I've worn the gloves, I've got so many gloves in this place. I mean, I don't know what it looks like. I've got hand gels, but here we are. I've got a virus. Just proves to you, doesn't it, that all this stuff is probably not a waste of time. And nobody's doing it. You go out and about, have to go out and go shopping, and who's wearing a mask? Nobody. You know, it's been passed really for months.
Well, I mean, apparently the news has come in that Stanley Johnson was caught not wearing a mask in a shop. You've just said that. Who's wearing a mask? Well, the Prime Minister's own father doesn't seem to be wearing a mask. And here you are wearing masks, sanitising everywhere. You've got gloves all over the place. How does that make you feel?
Well, I'm not surprised because you're joining the club. Most people go on the newsagent, the someone just dashes in, and no mask, you know, drop a parcel in, who cares, you know. It's been just absolutely, the people brought this on themselves, you know, they really have.
Well, I'm going to imagine that Stanley Johnson, the Prime Minister's father, would be able to get a test. Would you say so?
Oh, yes. Of course. He's got a hotline to Trump, hasn't he?
I think he'll manage a test, all right.
Oh, yeah.
But, I mean, you're someone who's taking such precautions. How does it make you feel when you see other people not taking those precautions? When you see people in shops not wearing a mask?
Well, this is like Cummings syndrome, isn't it? Yes, again. You know, they're not pulling their weight. They're just not doing it, are they?
Well, I mean, listen, I've been on the tube and I am enraged by the amount of people not wearing masks or wearing them with their noses out. Please, someone explain to me, and I'm waiting, and I ask every night on air, explain to me what the purpose of you wearing a mask with your nose out. It enrages me more than people not wearing a mask at all.
Well, the trouble is people get on their phones, don't they? And let's look at the phones. I mean, they must spread tons of virus, all these touch screens everywhere. That must be the biggest spreader of them all.
I wonder how many people sanitize their phones. I've been sanitizing my hands. I've been washing my hands when I come home. I've been wearing a mask. I very rarely sanitize my phone, though. So that's a really interesting point, Anthony. Quickly moving on to the presidential debate in the States. You watched it. You thought it was a fiasco?
Yes, of course. But it was entertaining at least, wasn't it? Because it's usually so kind of boring, those debates.
There was nothing boring about last night.
It was a good laugh.
It was. But I mean, did you never feel stressed? I thought I was going to throw my TV out the window, Anthony.
I felt tired in the end. I just got bored in the end. I think it went off the boil, so I watched about an hour. Then I had enough. You see, Trump is the prime minister. Biden is trying to outdo Trump as he now. It's kind of this show. It's been coached up. And I think the whole thing was rehearsed, to be honest with you. I think it was scripted.
Oh, do you think? Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
I think so.
I would like to think that if it was scripted, it probably would have been a lot better, Anthony.
Well, yes, that show bombed.
Will you be watching we've got 2 more presidential debates, will you be watching them?
Probably for entertainment value, but maybe just watch the recording, not stay up at till 3 in the morning.
It was a long night. I didn't get to bed last night till 5 a.m. How about that? Listen, Anthony, gorgeous talking to you. Best of luck with it. I really hope that you feel better tomorrow. Keep us in the loop. Give us a call tomorrow if you've managed to get a test. Tell us how it's going. You know, this is exactly the thing. We talk about COVID in the headlines every single day, but we often forget that it's behind every headline, behind every statistic. It's just people like you, Anthony, just trying to get a test and trying to figure out if you've got COVID or if you have it. Keep us updated. Let us know how it goes, and best of luck and get well soon.
Play BBC News for London. The BBC Radio London News Update. 5 things you need to know each day happening in our city in 2 minutes. 32 people were arrested at a protest. From the headlines to what's trending.
With no official announcement about his much anticipated return on
Do I take an umbrella out with me?
For a fine evening tonight will remain dry.
To who's making a difference?
Initiative celebrating the contribution of care home staff.
BBC Radio London News Update. Available on your smart speaker. Play BBC News for London twice a day.
BBC Radio London.
And of course, the news here today on all of the media headlines is the station. It's BBC Radio London, or of course 81333. Text message, just make sure you start your message with the word London, or get involved in the conversation on the phone 0800 731 2000. Of course, from midnight as well, we are going to be rolling up our sleeves and going in on loads of topics. But coming up, we're going to have a little chat with Lionheart, find out how his daily diary is doing. We've got poetry coming up. We've got my guest coming up as well. I'm really excited. Afrobeat star will be coming up to share some music and hopefully lighten his mood. We'll talk to you soon. Let's get some good vibes.
On digital radio, 94.9 FM, and on BBC Sounds.
This is London.
This is BBC Radio London.
At 11, we're on Alderson with your BBC News update. Boris Johnson's warning the UK is at a critical moment in the coronavirus pandemic and has urged people to adhere to the new rules. The Prime Minister made the comments during a news conference at Downing Street. He stressed it would take time for the latest package of measures to have an impact. They include limiting the number of people who can meet up inside and outside to 6, and he was asked if there are more restrictions to come.
The answer is, I'm afraid, entirely dependent on how effective we are now collectively in driving down the virus. And we know we can do it because we did it before. Our success will have to be judged, I'm afraid, in weeks ahead.
The Prime Minister has made similar comments in recent weeks. The BBC's Laura Koonsberg has more.
I think the reason we're hearing these kinds of warnings in pretty grave terms time and again is, of course, first and foremost, because there is real worry about the way the disease is spreading, but also because there is a concern about how much the public is really paying attention right now. And the other element to all of this is also the Prime Minister is working in a less forgiving, more hostile political environment.
The latest government figures show more than 7,000 new infections across the UK for the second day in a